The billionaire's manicured hand hovered across the polished mahogany bar when Lucas Grant spoke the word that would fracture both their worlds. No. 3 letters, 2 phonemes, and infinite consequence. Victoria Stone had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions with oil barons, stared down hostile board members, in glass towers, dismantled competitors with the precision of a surgeon. But she had never, not once, in 31 years been refused. Not in business. Not in life. And certainly not by a bartender working the graveyard shift in a downtown Chicago dive whose best years died with Reagan. Her fingers hung suspended in the amber light, the invitation to dinner at Alinea, dissolving into stunned silence like sugar and acid. Around them, the anchor bar maintained its late-night metabolism. Glasses clinked with the rhythm of the defeated. Conversations murmured in the key of insomnia. Someone fed quarters into a jukebox that had been playing the same 12 songs since the Soviet Union collapsed. But in that moment, the universe contracted to 2 people and 1 impossible syllable. Victoria's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Wounded pride collided with sudden burning curiosity. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "You're making a mistake." Lucas met her gaze without flinching. His tired eyes held depths she hadn't expected in a man who smelled of bourbon and exhaustion. Maybe. The word emerged quietly, carrying 7 years of careful decisions. But it's mine to make. The clock above the liquor shelf read 2:47 in the morning. October wind rattled the windows. Lucas had been wiping the same glass for the past 3 minutes, his hands moving with the muscle memory of someone who had performed this ritual so many times the motion had become prayer. He was 34 years old and looked older, not the weathered aging of sun and labor, but the particular exhaustion that settles into a man's bones when he's been carrying weight that never lightens. His dark hair needed cutting. His white shirt, pressed that morning, now showed the wear of a full shift. His eyes held that specific weariness of someone who'd learned early that life doesn't negotiate. Victoria Stone had entered the anchor bar 17 minutes earlier, and Lucas had known immediately she didn't belong. She moved like money, not the flashy nouveau riche kind that needed validation from strangers, but the deeper confidence of someone who'd never questioned whether a door would open. Her coat probably cost more than his car, though she wore it with the casualness of a woman who owned 17 more just like it. Dark hair fell in precise waves past her shoulders, the kind of cut that required maintenance appointments most people couldn't afford. Her features were striking in that way that suggested both genetics and expensive intervention. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes the color of expensive cognac. But it was her eyes that had caught him, sharp, assessing, scanning the room with the focus of someone who evaluated everything for its worth, its utility, its potential return on investment. She had settled onto a stool that squeaked slightly, the red vinyl split and repaired with duct tape that had itself faded to gray. Up close, Lucas revised his initial assessment. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe early 30s, though life had already written on her face, not with lines, but with a certain hardness around the mouth, a guardedness in the eyes that spoke of lessons learned and prices paid. "What can I get you?" His voice came out even professional, with a slight rasp that suggested too many late nights and not enough rest. She had smiled then, the kind of smile that probably closed deals in boardrooms. "What do you recommend?" He'd seen it for what it was, a small test, a way of turning the question back to see how he handled the asymmetry. "Depends on what you're looking for." He'd set down his glass, giving her his full attention in a way that was somehow both polite and impersonal. Something to celebrate, something to forget, or something to pass the time. The question had surprised her. He'd watched the recognition flicker across her face here, was someone who paid attention, who noticed things, who saw past the expensive clothes to the person underneath. "When you put it that way, I suppose I'm passing the time. Then you want the local whiskey." He'd reached for a bottle with a worn label produced 50 miles north by a distiller who'd rather go bankrupt than sell to corporate buyers. "It's not fancy, but it's honest. Made by a guy who refuses to compromise." He'd poured 2 fingers into a clean glass without asking if she wanted ice, somehow knowing she wouldn't. The gesture spoke of someone who'd spent years reading people understanding needs before they were articulated. She'd sipped. The whiskey was rough but good, with a warmth that spread genuine rather than affected. "You're right, it's honest. Honesty is underrated." He'd said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. They'd fallen into conversation the way strangers sometimes do, at late hours when the world shrinks down to a small circle of light and nothing outside it seems entirely real. She learned he worked nights so he could take morning classes as law, though he said it like he was admitting to a secret vice, something both ambitious and slightly embarrassing for a 34-year-old bartender to pursue. He learned she worked in business development, which was technically true, though comically understated, like calling the Pacific Ocean damp. What had surprised Victoria was how easily they talked. Usually conversations with strangers fell into predictable patterns. People either recognized her and became performative, or didn't recognize her and underestimated her. But Lucas Grant did neither. He listened when she talked, responded with thoughts instead of platitudes, and somehow made her forget she was a billionaire sitting in a dive bar at 3 in the morning drinking whiskey that cost $8 a pour. She'd found herself telling him things she rarely shared about her Vithar, who'd built Stone Industries from a single trucking company into a logistics empire, then died of a heart attack at his desk at 54, leaving her an inheritance of $30 million and impossible expectations. About the pressure of proving herself to a board that thought a 23-year-old woman couldn't possibly fill her father's shoes. About the loneliness of success, how every relationship seemed transactional, every conversation weighted with unspoken agendas. You ever just want to walk away from it, Lucas had asked. Start over somewhere where nobody knows your name every day. She'd finished her whiskey feeling the warmth settle beneath her ribs. But then in what I've spent 10 years building something that matters, proving I'm more than my father's daughter. Walking away would mean all of that was for nothing, or it would mean you did it. He'd begun wiping down the bar in slow circles, his movements meditative. Proved what you needed to prove. And now you're free to choose what comes next. The perspective shift was so simple it almost hurt. When did you get so wise I'm not wise? He'd smiled and it transformed his tired face into something younger, more open. I just don't have the luxury of complicated philosophy. When you're barely keeping your head above water, you learn to focus on what actually matters. It was nearly 4:30 when Victoria had glanced at her phone and seen 17 missed calls from her assistant. The real world was calling, demanding her attention with the insistence of responsibility that couldn't be postponed. I should go. The words came reluctantly, though she made no move to stand. Probably. Lucas had started collecting empty glasses, his movements efficient and practiced. Victoria had watched him work for a moment, this man who'd somehow made her forget herself for nearly 2 hours. She'd pulled out a business card, real cardstock, embossed the kind that cost $6 each, and set it on the bar between them. I'd like to see you again. Dinner, somewhere nicer than this. Lucas had picked up the card, his thumb running over the raised letters. She'd watched his face change as he read it, the slight widening of eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in posture as pieces clicked into place. Victoria Stone, CEO Stone Industries. The woman who'd been on the cover of Fortune 3 months earlier, standing in front of a warehouse with her arms crossed and her expression daring anyone to doubt her. I appreciate the offer. He'd set the card back down between them like he was returning something precious and dangerous. But I'm going to have to say no. The rejection had hit her like cold water, shocking in its unexpectedness. Victoria had forgotten what this felt like, the sting of being turned down, the confusion of not getting what she wanted. Why? Because I don't date customers. The excuse was so transparent it bordered on insulting. Bar policy, that's not the real reason. She'd heard the edge in her own voice, the sound of someone unaccustomed to obstacle. He'd met her eyes then, and she'd seen something in them that surprised her, respect mixed with what might have been regret. The real reason is that I know how this story goes. Woman like you, man like me. It doesn't end well. You get bored, I get hurt. And my son watches his father be a fool. So I'm saving us both the trouble. You're making assumptions. Her voice had come out sharper than intended, wounded pride bleeding through. I'm making observations. He wasn't unkind, but he wasn't yielding either. You came in here looking for something different, something real. And I am different. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm not after anything you have. That's interesting to you right now, but interesting doesn't last. Eventually, you'll remember you can have dinner with anyone in the city, and I'll remember I'm working 3 jobs to keep my head above water. Reality catches up. So you're protecting yourself. I'm protecting my son. The distinction mattered to him, she could tell. He's already lost one parent who couldn't handle real life. I won't let him get attached to someone who's going to disappear when the novelty wears off. Victoria had stood pulling her coat around her shoulders with movements that were too precise, too controlled. You're wrong about me, maybe. He'd said it gently without malice. But I can't afford to find out. She'd walked to the door, her heels clicking on worn linoleum, and stopped at the threshold. For what it's worth, Lucas Grant, I think you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe. His slight smile carried something like sadness. But it's mine to make. The door had closed behind her, and Lucas stood alone in the bar with the business card still sitting on the counter, like evidence of something that almost happened. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and then, after a long moment that felt like falling, slipped it into his pocket instead of the trash. Outside, Victoria had sat in the back of her waiting Escalade, her driver pretending not to notice the expression on her face. She'd pulled out her phone, opening the text thread with Diana Chen, her CFO, and the only person she trusted completely. Just got rejected by a bartender. The response came immediately. Is he blind? No. Victoria had typed back, staring at her reflection in the dark window. He's careful, and he thinks I'm going to break his heart. Are you? The question sat on the screen unanswered for a long time. Victoria thought about Lucas Grant, his tired eyes and careful hands, the way he'd listen, like her word mattered, the fierce protectiveness in his voice when he spoke about his son. She thought about how he'd turned her down, not because he wasn't interested, but because he was protecting something more important than attraction. I don't know, she'd finally replied, but I'm going to find out. She'd made a decision then, one that had nothing to do with business strategy or calculated risk. 5 minutes, that's all it would take. 5 minutes of genuine interest before Lucas Grant got bored or overwhelmed or realized she was exactly what he expected, another rich woman playing tourist in his world before returning to her own. 5 minutes before the differences between their worlds became too much and he walked away like everyone eventually did. She'd give him 5 minutes. And if he lasted longer, if he somehow survived past that initial flash of curiosity into something real, well, maybe she'd been wrong about what was possible. It became a private bet with herself, the kind of challenge Victoria thrived on. 5 minutes of her real attention, her genuine self, before he proved her right and disappeared like everyone else who claimed they wanted authenticity, but really just wanted the idea of it. What Victoria didn't know, sitting in that car at 4:45 in the morning as Chicago began its slow transition from night to dawn, was that Lucas Grant wasn't like everyone else. He was a man who'd spent years learning that things worth having were things worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth protecting, even when protection looked like pushing away what you wanted most. The bet was made. The game had begun, and neither of them had any idea how it would change everything. The next night, Lucas arrived at the Anchor Bar to find a single red rose lying across his station, still fresh with morning dew and the faint scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air. No note, no card, just the flower and the unmistakable message it carried. Marcus Webb, the day bartender, caught his expression and grinned. He was 58 years old with gray hair and kind eyes, a former attorney who'd lost everything when his wife's cancer treatment bankrupted them both. Now he tended bar and dispensed wisdom in equal measure. You holding out on me, Grant? Some lady came in around noon. Wouldn't give her name. Just left that and said you'd know who it was from. Lucas picked up a rose, carefully, thorns and all. He should throw it away. Should ignore it. Ignore her. Go back to the safe simplicity of his carefully controlled life. Instead, he found himself pressing the rose between the pages of his contract law textbook when he got home that morning, preserving it like it meant something. Victoria, for her part, wasn't used to patience. She'd built an empire by seeing what she wanted and taking it, by moving faster than the competition, by never giving anyone time to tell her no. But something about Lucas's rejection had lodged itself under her skin like a splinter, not painful exactly, but impossible to ignore. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments. During board meetings where Preston Whitmore droned on about quarterly projections, she'd remember the way Lucas had called her out on feeling lonely, the casual certainty that had somehow given her permission to be honest. While reviewing acquisition proposals that all blurred together into meaningless columns of numbers, she'd recall how he'd described his son, the fierce protectiveness in every word. At charity galas where men in expensive suits tried to impress her with their portfolios and pedigrees, she'd think about a man in a white shirt who'd turned her down because he couldn't afford to be wrong. Diana found her distracted during their weekly dinner at Gibson's, her attention drifting to her phone every few minutes. "You're checking to see if he called." It wasn't a question. Diana had known Victoria since Harvard had watched her build Stone Industries from her father's $30 million legacy into a $3.2 billion empire. She knew all of Victoria's tells, all her defenses, all the ways she protected herself from vulnerability. "I gave him my card, standard business practice." Victoria said it too quickly, too defensively. Diana set down her fork, her expression shifting from amused to serious. "I've known you since we were 20 years old. I've watched you close billion-dollar deals without blinking. I've never seen you chase someone who said no. I'm not chasing him. Then what are you doing?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in her glass and watching the light catch it, fracture it, turn it into something that looked like rubies. "Do you remember what you said when I took over Stone Industries? When the board was trying to force me out and every newspaper was questioning whether I could possibly fill my father's shoes, I said you were the smartest person I knew and they were fools to doubt you." "You said something else too." Victoria met her friend's eyes. "You said that being right gets lonely when everyone's rooting for you to fail." Diana reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Where are you going with this? That bartender's Lucas?" He looked at me like I was just a person. Not a success story, not a threat, not an opportunity. Just a woman sitting in a bar at 3 in the morning. Her voice softened. "Do you know how long it's been since someone saw me like that? So you're interested in him because he doesn't care about your money. I'm interested in him because he cares about more important things. His son, his mother, keeping his promises even when they cost him." Victoria's expression turned fierce. "He turned me down to protect his kid from getting hurt. When was the last time someone in my life chose integrity over opportunity?" Diana studied her friend, weighing words carefully. "Just be careful. Men who've been hurt before don't trust easy. And when they do trust, they go all in. If you're not serious about this, if you're just intrigued by the novelty of someone saying no, walk away now before anyone gets damaged. And if I am serious, then I hope he's worth it." Diana smiled, but concern lingered in her eyes. "And I hope you're ready for what it means to be with someone who has nothing to lose by walking away." The warning settled in Victoria's chest, both sobering and challenging. She was Victoria Stone, a woman who'd built an empire before 30. She didn't back down from challenges. She didn't quit when things got complicated. But she also didn't chase men who didn't want to be caught. Until now. A week passed, then two. The rose remained pressed in Lucas's textbook, a secret he didn't examine too closely. He told himself he was being smart, protecting Mason, keeping his life uncomplicated. He told himself a lot of things that would have been more convincing if he could stop thinking about the way Victoria Stone had looked in the dim bar light, the honesty in her voice when she'd admitted to being lonely. Mason noticed his distraction during their Saturday morning ritual. Pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, a tradition they'd started when his son was 3 and milk was still the beverage of choice. "Dad?" Mason looked up from his Triceratops pancake, his expression serious in the way 7-year-olds get when they're trying to understand adult mysteries. "Are you sad?" The question caught Lucas off guard. "No, buddy. Why would you think that? You keep staring at stuff without seeing it. That's what you do when you're worried about Grandma." His son's perception was too sharp, too mature for 7 years. Mason had learned early to read adult moods to sense disturbance in the emotional weather. "I'm not sad, just thinking about some work stuff." The lie tasted bitter. "Is it about the pretty lady?" The question froze Lucas mid-flip. "What pretty lady? The one who came to the bar last week. Mr. Marcus told me when I visited. He said she must have been really pretty because you looked different after she left." Mason's expression turned hopeful in a way that hurt. "Is she going to be my mom?" And there it was, the reason Lucas had turned Victoria down, crystallized in his son's eager face. Mason wanted a mother with the desperate hope of a child who'd learned too young that mothers could leave. He wanted it badly enough that any woman entering their life would immediately become a potential answer to that hole in his world. "No, buddy." Lucas sat down next to his son, abandoning the pancakes. "She's not going to be anybody's mom. She was just a customer at the bar. But Mr. Marcus said Mr. Marcus talks too much. Lucas softened the words with a gentle ruffle of Mason's hair. Listen to me. It's just you and me, okay? Same as always. That's not going to change. But what if you met someone nice, someone who liked dinosaurs, and didn't mind that we only have one bathroom? Mason's voice carried the careful hope of a child who'd learned to ask for things quietly, expecting nothing. Then I'd make sure she was really nice and really liked you before I even thought about anything else. Lucas pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of syrup and shampoo. But you don't worry about that. Your job is to be 7 years old and love dinosaurs. My job is to take care of us. Deal, deal. Mason hugged him back, fierce and trusting. But later, after Mason had gone to play with Legos in his room, Lucas found himself pulling out Victoria's business card again. He didn't call. He wasn't ready to cross that line, wasn't ready to risk what a phone call might mean. But he looked at it, running his thumb over the embossed letters the same way he had that first night. Victoria Stone, CEO, Stone Industries. A woman so far out of his league they weren't even playing the same sport. And yet he remembered the loneliness in her voice, the way she'd listened to his stories about Mason without that glazed look people got when parents talked about their kids. He remembered thinking just for a moment that maybe he'd misjudged her. Then he remembered his son asking if she was going to be his mother, and he put the card away. Some risks weren't worth taking. Some chances cost too much. He told himself that for 3 more days, right up until Victoria Stone walked back into the Anchor Bar. She came alone this time, dressed down in jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably still cost more than his monthly rent, but looked almost normal. It was a Tuesday night, the bar half full with regulars who barely glanced up when she entered. She took the same stool as before, folding her hands on the bar and waiting for him to acknowledge her. Lucas finished serving another customer before approaching, his expression carefully neutral. Whiskey, please. She watched him pour, noting the economy of his movements, the efficiency of someone who'd learned to waste nothing, not time, not energy, not words. He set the glass in front of her and moved a step away, but she spoke before he could retreat. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. Could have fooled me, but there was no heat in it, just weary curiosity. I've been thinking about what you said, about how this story goes, how it ends. She lifted the glass but didn't drink, just held it like a prop. You're probably right. Statistically, logically, based on every similar situation in human history, you're probably right. Okay. He didn't understand where she was going with this. But here's the thing about statistics and logic and history. They're backwards looking. They tell you what already happened, not what could happen. She finally met his eyes, and he saw something in them that looked like genuine uncertainty. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to have dinner with me. One meal, no expectations, no obligations. Just 2 people eating food and talking. I told you, I know what you told me. You're protecting your son. That's admirable. It's actually one of the things that made me want to know you better. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. But I'm not asking to meet your son. I'm not asking to be part of your life. I'm asking for 2 hours of your time in a public restaurant with no strings attached. If you have a horrible time, you never have to see me again. If I turn out to be everything you expected, shallow, bored, using you as a curiosity, you get to say, I told you so, and we both move on. And if neither of those things happens, then maybe we have a second dinner. Or maybe we don't. But at least we'll know instead of guessing. Lucas studied her, looking for the angle, the hidden cost, the catch that always came with offers that seemed too good. But all he saw was a woman who'd put herself out there with remarkable honesty, risking rejection for the second time because she thought he might be worth it. Why? He finally asked. Why me? You could have dinner with anyone in the city. Why push this honestly? She smiled, a little rueful, a little self-aware. Because you said no. Because you looked at me and saw past the money and the power and whatever else people see, and you still said no because you had something more important to protect. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many people in my life would sell their souls for an opportunity? So I'm interesting because I'm unavailable. That's not much better than what I said before. You're interesting because you're honest. Because you work 3 jobs and take care of your mother and raise your son and still find time to make sure a drunk regular gets home safe. Because you listened when I talked instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. Because when I admitted to being lonely, you didn't try to fix it or diminish it. You just acknowledged it was hard. Her voice softened. You're interesting because you're a good person in a world where good people are undervalued and overlooked. The words hit harder than they should have, reaching something deep in Lucas's chest that he'd learned to keep locked away. He'd spent so long being practical, being careful, being the responsible one who made smart choices. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something more than the sum of his obligations. One dinner. He heard himself say, surprised by the words even as they left his mouth. My night off is Friday, somewhere casual, nowhere too expensive, and I pay for my own meal. Victoria's smile was luminous, transforming her face into something beyond beautiful, something joyful and real, and almost vulnerable. Deal. Except for the paying part. You pick the place, I'll pick up the check. That's non-negotiable. Victoria, it's just money and I have more of it than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Let me buy you dinner without it meaning anything except that I asked and I can afford it, please. The please did it, the recognition that she was asking, not assuming, not leveraging power, but offering something simple and human. Okay, but nothing fancy. There's an Italian place near campus, family-owned, real food. Meet me there at 7. I'll be there. She finished her whiskey, set cash on the bar. That was twice what she owed, and stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Lucas, yeah, thank you for saying yes. Then she was gone, leaving him standing behind the bar with the certain knowledge that he'd just made either the best or worst decision of his life. Marcus appeared from the back room, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Please tell me that was her. Please tell me you didn't just turn down Victoria Stone again. I didn't turn her down. Lucas started wiping down the bar with more force than necessary. We're having dinner Friday, you lucky son of a... or the dumbest man alive. Jury's still out. But as he worked through the rest of his shift, Lucas found himself counting the days until Friday with something that felt dangerously close to anticipation. He told himself it was just dinner, just 2 hours, just a chance to prove they had nothing in common, so he could stop wondering. He told himself a lot of things that would have been more convincing if his hands weren't shaking slightly when he pulled out his phone and added Dinner Victoria to his calendar. 5 minutes, she'd told herself. She'd give him 5 minutes of genuine attention before he got bored or overwhelmed or proved her right about what happened when different worlds tried to collide. What neither of them knew yet was that 5 minutes had already passed. They'd blown past it that first night at the bar in the honesty of their conversation and the recognition of something rare passing between them. The bet was already lost. They just hadn't realized it yet. Friday arrived with the kind of autumn weather that makes everything feel possible. Crisp air, golden light leaves the color of fire falling like slow promises. Lucas spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Mason solemnly approved of. You look handsome, Dad. His son inspected him with 7-year-old gravity. Is this for the pretty lady? It's just dinner with a friend, buddy. The lie felt heavier than it should. Mom used to say people who are just friends don't get nervous about what they wear. Mason said it innocently, repeating something he had overheard years ago, but the words landed heavy. Lucas knelt down, meeting his son's eyes. You're too smart for your own good. You know that. That's what Grandma says. Mason hugged him spontaneously, fierce and quick. Have fun, Dad. You deserve fun. The simple blessing from his 7-year-old nearly undid him. Lucas held on an extra moment, breathing in the scent of his son's shampoo and the indefinable sweetness of childhood, reminding himself why he was careful, why he protected, what mattered, why some risks couldn't be taken lightly. Mrs. Chen from down the hall had agreed to watch Mason for the evening, her grandmotherly eyes twinkling with knowing approval, when Lucas explained he had plans. He escaped before she could ask too many questions, walking to Romano's because the October evening was beautiful, and he needed the time to think. The restaurant had been serving authentic Italian food for 40 years, run by the same family occupying the same corner with the same red checkered tablecloths and the same smell of garlic and basil that had become inseparable from the space itself. Lucas had discovered it during his first year of night school when he'd splurged on pasta to celebrate a good grade and ended up making friends with the owner's grandson, Marco. He arrived 15 minutes early, habit and nervousness combining into uncharacteristic punctuality. Marco spotted him from behind the host stand and grinned. Lucas, you finally bringing a date to my restaurant? I thought this day would never come. It's just dinner, Marco. Don't make it a thing. Everything's a thing when you never do anything. Marco grabbed menus with a flourish. I'm putting you in the back corner, the table by the window. Very romantic. Marco, trust me, my friend, you want romantic. Lucas let himself be led to the table, trying not to think about whether he wanted romantic or not. The corner was nice quiet, lit by amber glow from street lights through the window, far enough from other diners to allow for private conversation. He sat facing the door out of old habit, watching customers come and go, nursing the water Marco had poured with exaggerated ceremony. Victoria arrived exactly at 7, and Lucas's first thought was that she'd listen. She wore jeans and a simple green sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. She'd made herself almost ordinary, and the effort touched him more than any expensive dress could have. She spotted him and smiled, and that smile did something complicated to his chest, equal parts terror and possibility. Hi. She slid into the chair across from him. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. I wasn't sure either. The honesty made her laugh. At least we're both uncertain together. That's something. They ordered. She took his recommendation on the pasta. He suggested the wine. And suddenly they were just two people having dinner, instead of a CEO and a bartender trying to bridge impossible distance. The conversation flowed easier than it should have, natural and unforced, covering everything and nothing. She told him about growing up as an only child with a father who built empires and expected perfection, about the pressure of inheriting more than money, inheriting expectations, assumptions, a legacy that didn't leave room for failure. He told her about his own father, a man who had promised to stay and left instead, teaching young Lucas that words meant nothing if actions didn't back them up. Is that why you're so careful? Victoria twirled pasta on her fork with the kind of focus that suggested the question mattered. Because you learned early that people leave maybe. Lucas considered it appreciated that she asked instead of assumed. Or maybe I'm careful because I learned what it costs when they do. My mother worked herself half to death after he left. I watched her choose between rent and food, between pride and asking for help. I won't do that to Mason. I won't let him wonder if his father's going to stay. So you stay. Her voice was soft. So I stay. He said it simply, a fact as fundamental as gravity. That's admirable. She meant it. He could tell. And terrifying for anyone trying to get close to you, because they know if they leave, there'll be another person who hurt you and your son. The stakes are never just about the two of you. The perception caught him off guard. She'd seen something he'd barely articulated to himself. Is that what you're trying to do? Get close? I don't know yet. She met his eyes and her honesty was disarming. I'm trying to figure out if there's something here worth exploring. If you're the kind of person who'd be worth the complication. They talked through dinner and into dessert tiramisu that Marco insisted they try, sharing the plate between them like the intimacy of it was already decided. She asked about his classes, genuinely interested in his studies on contract law and constitutional precedent. He asked about Stone Industries, and she explained her latest acquisition with a passion that made her beautiful in an entirely new way. You really love it, he observed. The work, not just the success. I love building things, taking something broken and making it better, stronger. There's satisfaction in that. She paused, considering. Is that what you want from law? To build things, to protect things, actually? To make sure people like my mother have someone who fights for them when the system tries to grind them down? He said it with quiet conviction. Rich people have entire firms on retainer. Poor people have overworked public defenders and a system that assumes they're guilty. I want to balance that scale even just a little. Victoria was quiet for a moment, something shifting in her expression. You know what's funny? While I went into business to build an empire, you're going into law to make sure empires don't crush people. We're almost opposites. Almost? He smiled. Except you're using your empire to build green energy and create jobs. Maybe we're not as opposite as we look. The night stretched on, neither of them in a hurry for it to end. They talked about books and movies, discovered a shared love of old noir films, and a mutual hatred of cilantro. She told him about the pressure of constant visibility, how exhausting it was to have every decision scrutinized. He told her about the quiet satisfaction of small victories, Mason's good report card, his mother's rare good days, the regular who just celebrated 5 years sober. Your life is rich, Victoria said eventually, and it wasn't condescending or pitying, just observation. Not in money, but in meaning. Everything you do matters to someone. Everything you do matters to thousands of people. Your employees, their families, the communities where you build. That's not nothing. No, but it's abstract. Numbers on a spreadsheet, metrics in a quarterly report. She looked down at her empty wine glass. When was the last time I knew I made a real difference in someone's actual life? You helped fund the clinic where my mother gets her care. Stone Foundation grant 3 years ago. That matters, he said it quietly, watching recognition dawn on her face. Your money paid for the nurse who sits with her when she's confused. The medication that keeps her comfortable. You might not see it, but trust me, it matters. Her eyes went bright with emotion. She quickly blinked away. I didn't know that. Why would you? You've probably funded hundreds of clinics. He reached across the table, a gesture that surprised them both, his hand covering hers. But that's my point. You're doing things that matter. You're just too busy building to notice the impact. They stayed like that for a moment, hands touching across the table in Romano's back corner, while around them the restaurant carried on its Friday night rhythm. It was a small moment, barely significant, but it felt like something shifting, like the distance between their worlds narrowing just slightly. Marco appeared to clear their plates, his knowing smile irritating and comforting in equal measure. Can I interest you in coffee? Or perhaps you'd like to just sit and talk all night? I don't close for another hour and you two seem occupied. Coffee sounds good, Victoria said, not breaking eye contact with Lucas. If that's okay. Coffee's good, he agreed. They talked for another hour, covering comfortable and uncomfortable with equal honesty. She admitted her last relationship had ended because she'd worked through their anniversary dinner without noticing. He admitted he sometimes used Mason as an excuse to avoid risking anything personal. She confessed to being scared of ending up alone with nothing but her bank account for company. He confessed to being terrified that anyone who got close would eventually decide he wasn't worth the struggle. You know what I think, Victoria said eventually, as they stood to leave the restaurant empty, now except for Marco pretending not to eavesdrop. I think we're both scared of the same thing. What's that? That we might actually be worth the risk. They walked out together into the October night, the air colder now, carrying the promise of winter. Lucas's car was parked in the opposite direction from where Victoria's driver waited, creating a natural moment of decision. Thank you, she said, for saying yes, for giving this a chance. Thank you for asking twice, for not taking no for an answer even when it would have been easier. Is this where I'm supposed to ask if I'll see you again? There was vulnerability in the question, rare for someone as powerful as Victoria Stone. Would you want to? Yes. No hesitation, no coyness. I'd like that very much. Then I guess you'll see me again. He smiled, feeling something ease in his chest. But next time I'm paying, we'll negotiate. She stepped closer, and for a moment he thought she might kiss him. Instead, she just touched his arm, brief contact that somehow felt more intimate than a kiss might have been. Good night, Lucas Grant. Good night, Victoria Stone. He watched her walk to her car, watched the driver open her door with practiced precision, watched her disappear into the back seat. Only when the car had pulled away did he turn toward his own vehicle, his thoughts a complicated tangle of hope and fear and possibility. The second dinner happened 3 days later, this time at a Thai restaurant Victoria suggested in a neighborhood Lucas had never visited. She arrived before him, already seated at a corner table with spring rolls and 2 glasses of water waiting. You're early, Lucas said, sliding into the chair across from her. I was nervous. She said it with a slight smile that suggested she wasn't used to admitting such things. Kept thinking you might change your mind. I almost did about 6 times between Friday and today. He picked up a spring roll, appreciating that she'd already ordered appetizers. Mason asked me this morning if you were my girlfriend. I didn't know what to tell him. What did you say? That you were a friend I was getting to know. He wanted to know if that meant you'd come over for dinosaur movie night. Lucas watched her face for signs of panic or retreat. I told him probably not. Why probably not? There was genuine curiosity in the question, not offense. Because I don't introduce people to my son unless I know they're staying, and I don't know that yet. He met her eyes, needing her to understand. That's not a criticism, it's just reality. We've had 2 dinners. That doesn't mean anything except we enjoyed each other's company twice. Fair enough. She took a spring roll, dipping it in sauce with careful precision. For what it's worth, I think about him, your son. I wonder what he's like. Whether he has your eyes. If he's as stubborn as you are, he's more stubborn. Gets it from his grandmother. Lucas softened despite himself. He's smart, curious about everything. Wants to be a paleontologist this week. Last week it was an astronaut. The week before that, a chef who only makes breakfast food. Victoria laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. 7-year-olds contain multitudes. They do. It's exhausting and amazing in equal measure. He paused, then decided honesty was the only path forward. You should know if this goes anywhere, if we become something real, Mason comes first. Always. That's not negotiable. I wouldn't respect you if it was any other way. She said it with such simple certainty that something in his chest loosened. Lucas, I'm not asking to compete with your son. I'm asking to get to know you. If that eventually includes meeting him, great. If it doesn't work out before we get there, then we'll both move on. But right now, in this moment, can we just be two people having dinner without mapping out the entire future? The perspective shift was both relief and challenge. She was right. He was catastrophizing, planning for disaster before anything had really begun. But she also didn't understand that for him, every choice about his personal life was about disaster planning. One wrong decision, one person who hurt Mason or left without warning could damage his son in ways that might take years to heal. I can try, he said finally. But fair warning, I'm not good at living in the moment. I'm always 3 steps ahead looking for problems. Then I'll have to work harder to keep you present. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. Starting with this, what's the best thing that happened to you this week? The question was so unexpected, so deliberately focused on the positive, that it took him a moment to answer. Mason learned to tie his shoes finally. We'd been practicing for months, and Tuesday morning, he just did it. Perfect loops and everything. He was so proud he wore those shoes to bed that night. Victoria's smile transformed her face. That's beautiful. What about you? Best thing this week, this, she gestured between them, sitting here learning about shoe tying victories, realizing that some things are worth being nervous about. The evening unfolded with the same easy comfort as their first dinner. They ordered enough to share pad thai for him, green curry for her, the kind of sharing that happens when people have already decided togetherness beats separation. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm of dinners twice a week, texts throughout the day, phone calls late at night when Mason was asleep, and Victoria's work finally released her. Each conversation revealed new layers, new complexities, new reasons to keep trying despite obvious obstacles. Lucas learned that Victoria was afraid of flying, despite traveling constantly for business. That she'd taken up painting during the pandemic and wasn't very good but loved it anyway. That she cried at dog adoption commercials but maintained perfect composure during hostile board meetings. She learned that he could quote entire scenes from films he'd watched once years ago, that he made breakfast for dinner when he was too tired to think, that he'd secretly wanted to be a writer before life demanded more practical ambitions. They were careful not to let their relationship bleed into the rest of their lives too quickly. Lucas still hadn't introduced her to Mason properly, though his son had started asking pointed questions about where Dad kept disappearing to twice a week. Victoria hadn't mentioned Lucas to anyone except Diana, keeping him separate from the scrutiny and speculation that would inevitably come if her relationship became public knowledge. It felt sustainable, this private bubble they'd created. Until the morning, everything shifted. Lucas was working an early shift at the campus coffee shop, a third job he'd picked up to cover an unexpected car repair, when his phone rang with a call from the nursing facility. His mother's doctor spoke in careful tones, reserved for bad news delivered gently. Pneumonia, admitted to the hospital. Stable but serious. Could he come as soon as possible? He made it to the hospital in 20 minutes, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, his mind cataloging everything that needed rearranging. Classes, shifts, Mason's pickup from school. His mother looked small in the hospital bed, oxygen tubes and IV lines, turning her into something fragile and temporary. She was sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady, and the doctor explained treatment plans and timelines with professional compassion that did nothing to ease the fear settling in Lucas's chest. She'll need someone with her, the doctor said. At least for the first 48 hours. Family, if possible. I'll be here. The words came automatically, though his mind was already spinning through logistics. He'd have to call in sick to work, miss classes, figure out coverage for Mason. Mrs. Chen could help, but not indefinitely. Everything was about to get complicated again, the careful balance he'd built threatening to collapse under the weight of crisis. He texted Victoria without thinking about it, his fingers moving before his brain could override. "My mother's in the hospital. Pneumonia, I'm going to be here a while." Her response came within minutes. "Which hospital I'm coming?" "You don't have to do that," he typed even as relief flooded through him. "I know you're busy. I know, but I'm coming anyway. Send me the address." She arrived an hour later, still dressed in what was clearly a business suit, her hair pulled back severely, looking every inch the CEO except for the worry in her eyes. She found him in the waiting room during one of his mother's tests, sitting with cold coffee and the kind of exhaustion that comes from fear rather than sleeplessness. "Hey," she said quietly, sliding into the chair beside him. "How is she stable?" "They're running more tests." He couldn't quite look at her, afraid that meeting her eyes would break whatever composure he was maintaining. "You didn't have to come." Victoria waited until he looked at her. "Where else would I be?" The simple question undid something in his chest. He'd spent so long handling everything alone, being the strong one, the reliable one, the person everyone else leaned on. He'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone show up just because he needed them. "Thank you," he managed, "for being here. Always." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Tell me what you need." "What can I do?" "Nothing. Everything." "I don't know." He rubbed his free hand over his face, trying to organize thoughts that kept scattering. "I need to pick up Mason from school in 3 hours. I need to cover my shifts at work. I need to not fall apart when my mother wakes up and doesn't remember who I am." Victoria was quiet for a moment, and he could almost see her brain working, organizing, solving problems, the way she'd built an empire by breaking impossible tasks into manageable pieces. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to sit with your mother while you pick up Mason. Then you're both going to come back here because she's his grandmother and he deserves to see her. I'll stay as long as you need backup. Victoria, you can't just cancel your day. I own the company, Lucas. I can do whatever I want." She said it without arrogance, just stating fact. "Besides, Diana's been telling me I work too much. This is me taking her advice. What about your meetings, your obligations? I have a phone and a laptop. Anything urgent I can handle from here. Anything not urgent can wait." She squeezed his hand. "Let me help, please." He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his independence, wanted to prove he could handle this alone, the way he'd handled everything else. But he was tired, bone deep, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with years of carrying weight without relief. And Victoria was here solid and certain, offering help without pity or judgment. "Okay," he said finally. "Thank you." His mother woke 20 minutes later, groggy from medication but lucid. She looked at Lucas with clear recognition that made his throat tight with relief. "You came." Her voice was raspy from the oxygen. "Of course I came, Mom. Where else would I be?" He took her hand carefully, mindful of the IV. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck made of exhaustion." She tried to smile, but it came out weak. "Don't look so worried. I'm too stubborn to go anywhere yet." "Good, because Mason would never forgive me if something happened to his favorite grandmother. I'm his only grandmother." But the correction carried affection. Her eyes drifted to Victoria, standing respectfully near the door, and curiosity sharpened her expression. "And who's this, Mom?" "This is Victoria. She's a friend." The label felt inadequate but sufficient for now. "A friend who shows up at hospitals." His mother's gaze was knowing despite the illness. "Those are the best kind of friends." Victoria stepped forward, her corporate polish somehow softening into something warmer. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Grant. I've heard wonderful things about you." "Well, you can't believe all of them." His mother tried for levity but started coughing, a rattling sound that had the nurse appearing immediately to check vitals and adjust oxygen. Lucas stepped back to give the medical staff room, and Victoria moved with him, a silent presence at his shoulder. When the nurse finally left with assurances that everything was stable, his mother was drifting back to sleep. Lucas stood alone in the hallway with Victoria, his careful composure finally cracking. "I can't lose her." The words came out barely above a whisper. "Not yet. Mason needs her. I need her. She's supposed to get better, supposed to have more time." Victoria pulled him into a hug without asking permission, and he let himself lean into her, let himself be held, while fear and exhaustion leaked out in shaky breaths he wouldn't dignify by calling tears. She didn't offer empty reassurances or false promises. She just held him solid and warm until he could breathe normally again. "I'm sorry," he said, eventually pulling back and wiping his face. "I don't usually fall apart like that." "You're not falling apart. You're being human in an impossible situation." She kept one hand on his arm, grounding. "And you don't have to apologize for feeling things. I should be stronger than this." "What? Because you're always the strong one, because everyone depends on you, so you're not allowed to need support." She said it gently but firmly. "That's not strength, Lucas. That's just exhaustion, wearing a brave mask." He wanted to argue, but the words dried up because she was right. He'd been the strong one for so long that he'd forgotten strong people needed help too, that asking for support wasn't the same as failing. "I need to get Mason," he said, instead checking his phone. "School lets out in 45 minutes. Go. I'll stay with your mother. If anything changes, I'll call immediately." When he started to protest, she held up a hand. "I'll just sit here and work on my laptop. If anything changes, I'll call. But she shouldn't be alone, and you need to take care of your son." "You're sure?" "Completely." She kissed his cheek, quick and reassuring. "Go be dad. I've got mom duty covered." The casual way she said it, mom duty, hit him unexpectedly hard. This was what partnership looked like, he realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but someone showing up in a hospital and staying so he could pick up his kid from school. Someone who saw what needed doing and did it without needing credit or recognition. He picked up Mason, explaining about Grandma in careful terms that acknowledged the seriousness without terrifying a 7-year-old. Mason took it with the resilience of children who'd already learned that life didn't always cooperate with what you wanted. His main concern, whether Grandma would be okay and could they visit her. They stopped home long enough for Mason to grab the drawing he'd made that morning. A dinosaur family complete with labels and careful coloring, then headed back to the hospital. Lucas texted Victoria as they parked. "Coming up with Mason. Fair warning, he's going to have questions." "Bring them on," she replied. "I like curious kids." He found her exactly where he'd left her laptop, balanced on her knees, phone pressed to her ear, as she conducted what sounded like a board meeting from a hospital chair. She held up one finger when she saw them wrapping up with efficient authority before ending the call. "Sorry about that. Quarterly projections wait for no one." She stood closing her laptop, and her attention shifted completely to Mason with an ease that surprised Lucas. "You must be Mason." "I'm Victoria." Mason, who'd been uncharacteristically shy, studied her with the serious assessment of a child deciding whether an adult was trustworthy. "You're the friend who came to help with Grandma." "That's right. Your dad was worried about her, and I wanted to make sure he wasn't alone." "That's nice." Mason considered this, then held out his drawing. "I made this for Grandma. Do you think she'll like it?" Victoria took the picture with appropriate reverence, examining it like it was fine art. "This is spectacular. Is that a whole family of stegosauruses?" "Stegosauri," Mason corrected automatically. "That's the proper plural. And yes, that's the mom, dad, and 3 babies." "I did research. I can tell. The detail is impressive." She handed it back carefully. "She's going to love this." They went into his mother's room together, Mason climbing carefully onto the bed to show his grandmother the drawing. She woke enough to admire it properly to tell him it was the best dinosaur family she'd ever seen, to make him promise to keep being good for his dad. Victoria hung back, giving them space but staying close enough to help if needed. Watching her with his family, patient with Mason's chatter, gentle with his mother's frailty, supporting Lucas without taking over, something shifted in his chest. This wasn't just attraction anymore, wasn't just the excitement of a new relationship. This was something deeper, something that looked dangerously like love taking root. They stayed until visiting hours ended, Mason falling asleep with his head on Lucas's shoulder, while Victoria handled work emails on her phone with one hand and held Lucas's hand with the other. When a nurse finally suggested they go home and rest, promising to call if anything changed overnight, Lucas felt the resistance of wanting to stay war with the exhaustion of knowing he needed sleep. "Come on," Victoria said quietly. "You need rest. She'll be here in the morning." They walked to the parking garage together, Mason heavy and warm against Lucas's chest, dead to the world, in the way only exhausted children can manage. At Victoria's car, he finally put his son down, the boy immediately clinging to his leg like a sleepy koala. Thank you. Lucas said the words inadequate for everything she'd done today, for showing up, for staying, for being exactly what we needed. You don't have to thank me for caring about you. She touched his face gently, thumb brushing his cheekbone. That's what people do when they matter to each other. She stopped the sentence, hanging unfinished. When they what his heart was suddenly loud in his ears, when they matter to each other. She finished it safely, but her eyes held something bigger, something neither of them was quite ready to say out loud. You matter, he said quietly. More than I expected. More than I'm prepared for. Good, because you matter to me too. She kissed him softly, carefully aware of his sleeping son, but needing the contact anyway. Text me when you get home, and in the morning, and honestly, whenever you need anything. That's a lot of texting. I can handle it. She ruffled Mason's hair gently. Take care of each other. He watched her drive away, then looked down at his sleeping son. What do you think, buddy? Is she a keeper? Mason mumbled something unintelligible and burrowed deeper into Lucas's leg. Lucas took that as approval and headed to his own car, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy blanket. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hospital visits, work shifts he couldn't afford to miss, and juggling Mason's care with his mother's needs. Victoria showed up every day, bringing coffee and food and steady presence that kept him grounded. She charmed the nurses, entertained Mason with stories about disastrous business meetings, and sat with his mother during the long stretches when all there was to do was wait. On the third day, when the doctor declared his mother stable enough to return to the nursing facility, Lucas felt relief and guilt in equal measure. Relief that she was recovering. Guilt that he was grateful to have his life return to manageable chaos. Victoria found him in the parking lot after everything was settled, leaning against his car and staring at nothing in particular. Hey, she said softly. You okay? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow when I've slept more than 4 hours. He rubbed his face scruff rough under his palm. I keep thinking about what the doctor said, that this is the pattern now. She'll have episodes, recover, have another episode, each one taking a little more. Until you lose her. Victoria finished what he couldn't say. I'm sorry, that's impossibly hard. The worst part is that I'm already grieving someone who's still here. Already mourning the mother I'm losing piece by piece instead of being grateful for the time we have left. His voice cracked. What kind of son does that make me? The human kind. She moved in front of him, taking his face in both hands and forcing him to meet her eyes. You're allowed to grieve what you're losing while loving what remains. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You're not failing her by being sad. How are you so good at this? At knowing exactly what to say. I'm not good at it. I'm just honest about how hard things are. She dropped her hands but stayed close. And I care about you, which makes it easier to find the right words. They stood like that for a long moment, the hospital parking lot carrying on around them. Ambulances arriving, families leaving, the constant churn of crisis and recovery that define these places. Finally, Lucas' straightened decision crystallizing. Come to dinner tomorrow night, at my place. I want you to meet Mason properly. Not in a hospital, not in passing. Actually meet him. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Are you sure that's a big step? I'm sure. You've spent 3 days helping with my family crisis. You've met my mother, charmed my son while he was half asleep, and you didn't run screaming when faced with the reality of my life. He reached for her hand. If you're still here after all that, then I want you to actually be here. No more keeping you separate, okay? Her smile was uncertain and hopeful at once. What time? 6. I'll cook. Mason insists we have dinosaur nuggets on Fridays, so don't expect anything fancy. Dinosaur nuggets sound perfect. She kissed him soft and lingering. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for staying. The next evening arrived with the kind of autumn weather that carried both promise and warning. Lucas cleaned his apartment with nervous energy, usually reserved for job interviews. He knew intellectually that Victoria had seen worse. She'd spent 3 days in a hospital, had witnessed his life at its most chaotic. But inviting her into his home felt different, more vulnerable, more real. Mason vibrated with barely contained excitement once Lucas explained that his friend Victoria was coming for dinner. The pretty lady from the hospital. The one who knew about Stegosauri. That's the one. And buddy, I need you to be cool, okay? No interrogating her about whether she's going to be your mom. I'm 7, not stupid. Mason rolled his eyes with impressive 7-year-old attitude. But can I show her my dinosaur collection after dinner if she asks? Lucas gave his son a serious look. And remember, just because she's coming to dinner doesn't mean anything's decided. We're taking things slow. Dad, Mason's expression was patient, almost pitying. You've been different for weeks. Happy different. That's because of her. I know things. His son's perceptiveness was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. Okay, wise guy, set the table. Victoria arrived exactly at 6, dressed down in jeans and a soft sweater, carrying a bag that clinked suspiciously. I brought wine for us and apple juice for Mason, and cookies from that bakery you mentioned. Hope that's okay. It's perfect. Lucas accepted the bag, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Come in. Warning, my apartment is small and old, and nothing like what you're used to. Good, I like small and old. She stepped inside, taking in the space with genuine interest rather than judgment. The apartment was small, living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, bathroom, but it was clean and filled with signs of life. Mason's drawings covered the fridge. Books overflowed their shelves. Photos documented father and son, through the years a visual timeline of Lucas keeping his promise to stay. Hi, Victoria. Mason appeared from his room, suddenly shy now that the moment was here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. She crouched down to his level, not forcing closeness, but making herself accessible. Your dad tells me you're the dinosaur expert around here. I know a lot about them. The qualifier was careful, the words of a kid who'd learned not to brag. I'm still learning, though. The best experts are always still learning. That's how you know they're real experts. They work together with surprising ease. Victoria setting the table while Lucas finished cooking, Mason providing running commentary on his day at school, and the fact that Marcus in his class thought velociraptors were bigger than they actually were and needed education. The normalcy of it, the 3 of them moving around each other in the small kitchen, the smell of garlic bread and marinara, Mason's chatter filling the space felt both wonderful and terrifying. This was what family looked like, and Lucas was letting himself imagine it might be real. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Mason asked Victoria approximately 700 questions, ranging from favorite dinosaurs, to whether she thought money was weird, to what superpower she'd want, but only on Tuesdays. Victoria answered each question with genuine thought, never condescending, treating his 7-year-old logic with the same seriousness she probably gave board meetings. I think money is extremely weird. She dipped a dinosaur nugget in ketchup with the solemnity the moment required. We all agree these paper rectangles have value, and that agreement only works if everyone keeps believing it. It's like mass delusion we all participate in. Mason considered this, impressed. That is weird. Dad, did you know money is mass delusion? I had my suspicions. Lucas caught Victoria's eye across the table, something warm passing between them. She got it. Got Mason. Got the weird, wonderful logic of 7-year-olds. Got how to be present without trying to be a parent. After dinner, Mason showed Victoria his dinosaur collection as promised, explaining each figure with a detailed knowledge of someone who'd studied extensively. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention, not just humoring a child. This one's a Pachycephalosaurus. Mason held up a figure with a distinctive domed head. They used to think these guys headbutted each other, but now scientists think the bone was too fragile for that. So maybe they just showed off their heads instead of fighting. Smart. Why risk injury when you can just look impressive? Victoria glanced at Lucas. Sound like anyone you know. He laughed despite himself. I'm choosing not to answer that. Eventually, Mason's bedtime arrived, and Lucas went through the ritual, teeth brushing, pajamas, 3 stories, because Mason negotiated up from 2. When he returned to the living room, he found Victoria standing by the bookshelf, examining the photos there with careful attention. He's beautiful. She pointed to a picture of Mason at maybe 4 years old, gap-toothed, and grinning at the camera. You were both so young. 25 felt like a kid raising a kid. Lucas moved to stand beside her, but we figured it out. Mostly, you did more than figure it out. You built something real. She turned to face him fully. He's confident and curious and kind. That's all you, Lucas. That's you being an incredible father. It's terrifying how much I love him, how much power he has to hurt me just by being hurt himself. The admission came easier now after days of letting her see his vulnerability. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night just to make sure he's still breathing. That's love. She touched his chest right over his heart. The scary, overwhelming, would die for them kind. It's beautiful. They stood close in the dim living room, the apartment quiet now. Except for ambient noise, plumbing, and walls, neighbors through thin floors, the city humming outside. Lucas pulled her closer, his arms around her waist, her hands settling on his shoulders. Thank you for tonight, for being so good with him, for not trying too hard or pretending to be something you are not. I like him, genuinely. Victoria smiled. He's smart and funny and clearly adores you. How could I not like him? Still, it means something that you showed up and stayed and didn't get scared by the reality of what dating me actually looks like. Lucas, she said his name like a gentle correction. I'm not scared of dinosaur nuggets and bedtime stories. I'm scared of this ending before we figure out what it could be. What do you want it to be? The question was quiet but crucial, demanding honesty neither of them had quite articulated yet. I want it to be real, not just exciting or interesting or different from my usual life, actually real with complications and difficulties and all the messy human stuff that comes with caring about someone. She met his eyes, fearless. I want you, Lucas. Not for 5 minutes, not until the novelty wears off. Just you for as long as you'll let me stay. His heart was thunder in his chest, loud and insistent. That's terrifying to hear. Why? Because I want that too, and wanting it means I can lose it. The fear came out raw, unpolished. I'm falling for you, Victoria. Hard and fast and completely inconvenient. And that scares the hell out of me because you could destroy me. You could walk into my life, let me imagine a future, let Mason start to love you, and then decide it's too hard or too complicated or not worth the effort. And I'd have to watch my son lose another person, and I don't know if I can survive being that wrong about someone again. I'm not Jessica. She said it fiercely, no hesitation. I'm not going to get scared and leave. I'm not going to give up when things get hard. That's not who I am. You say that now, I'm saying it now, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me. She framed his face with both hands. I love you, Lucas Grant. I'm in love with your stubbornness and your fear and your fierce protection of your son. I'm in love with the man who works 3 jobs and goes to night school and still finds time to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes. I'm in love with you, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to leave. The words landed like physical force, knocking the breath from his lungs. No one had said those words to him in years. Not since Jessica. Not since For Everything Fell Apart. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be loved, to be chosen to be someone's first priority instead of their backup plan. I love you too. The words came out rough, scraped raw by years of not saying them. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I love you, and I'm terrified that loving you means losing you. Then we'll be terrified together. She kissed him deep and demanding, and he kissed her back with years of lonely nights and careful walls finally crumbling. They kissed like people who'd found something rare and weren't willing to let it go easily. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. So what now? Now we try, really try. No more holding back, no more protecting myself by keeping you at distance. We do this for real, knowing it might hurt betting on each other anyway. I like those odds. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I need you to promise me something. What if you get scared, if you start spiraling into catastrophizing about all the ways this could end? Talk to me. Let me in instead of pushing me away. Can you do that? It would be hard. Every instinct screamed to protect himself by retreating. But she deserved that trust, deserved the chance to prove she meant what she said. I can try. That's the best I can promise. Trying is enough. She kissed him again, softer this time. She left around 10, both of them reluctant to end the evening, but aware of early morning obligations. Lucas walked her to the door, already missing her presence. Victoria, yeah. Thank you for saying it first, for being braver than me. We take turns being brave. That's how this works. She smiled, touching his face one more time. I'll text you tomorrow. After she left, Lucas stood in his quiet apartment, his lips still tingling from her kiss, his chest full of something that felt like hope and terror in equal measure. He checked on Mason one more time, still sleeping, still safe, and then collapsed into his own bed, exhausted and exhilarated at once. His phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for letting me meet Mason. He's wonderful. You're wonderful. I meant everything I said." He smiled, typing back. "I meant it too. All of it." "Good," she replied, "because I'm not giving up on us, even when you get scared. Especially when I get scared." He corrected. "Especially then." She agreed. He fell asleep with his phone still in his hand, Victoria's words replaying in his mind. She loved him had said it first without hesitation, staking her claim before he'd had the courage to stake his. And she'd promised to stay promised, to work through the fear and complication and messy reality of loving someone with a complicated life. The 5-minute bet had been lost weeks ago, but neither of them had admitted it until now. They'd blown past curiosity and into something real, something that couldn't be measured in minutes or controlled by careful planning. They'd fallen, and now they had to trust that the landing wouldn't destroy them both. The morning after Victoria's confession arrived with catastrophe wrapped in newsprint and digital ink. Lucas woke to his phone exploding with notifications, 89 missed calls, texts flooding in faster than he could read them. Marcus's name appeared most frequently, each message more urgent than the last. "BRO, check Chicago Tribune, Chicago. Now, Lucas, answer your phone. This is bad. Call me." His hands shook as he pulled up the Tribune's website. The headline hit him like a fist to the sternum. "Stone Cold CEO's secret blue-collar boyfriend." The subheading was worse. "Billionaire Victoria Stone, 31, caught romancing struggling bartender father of one." The photo was damning in its intimacy. Lucas and Victoria outside his apartment building, her arms around his neck, his hands on her waist, kissing like the world had contracted to just the two of them, which it had in that moment. But now that private moment was public dissected, commodified, turned into entertainment for strangers over morning coffee. He scrolled through the article, each paragraph a fresh violation. Sources close to the situation. Questions about Victoria's judgment. Speculation about Lucas's motives. References to his multiple jobs, his student loans, his status as a single father. Everything stripped bare and evaluated for its entertainment value. The doorbell rang before he could process it all. Mrs. Chen stood in the hallway, her face concerned, holding Mason's hand. The boy looked scared, his eyes red like he'd been crying. "What happened?" Lucas pulled Mason inside, kneeling to his level. "Reporters." Mrs. Chen's voice was tight with anger. "3 of them outside the building asking about you and Ms. Stone. One tried to interview Mason when I brought him back from breakfast." Cold fury washed through Lucas, the protective rage of a parent whose child had been threatened. "Did they touch him?" "No, but they asked questions. About his mother, about whether you were dating Miss Stone for money, about." Mrs. Chen stopped glancing at Mason. "Things a 7-year-old shouldn't have to answer." Lucas pulled his son close, feeling the tremor in the small body. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe. I'm here. Dad, the kids at school are going to see this." Mason's voice was small, scared in a way that broke Lucas's heart. "They're going to say mean things about you. About us. We'll handle it." But even as he said it, Lucas felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just gossip. This was his life, his son's life, turned into spectacle. This was strangers with cameras hunting Mason at breakfast, asking questions designed to hurt. His phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on screen, and he answered despite Mrs. Chen's presence, despite knowing he should wait until he had privacy. "Are you seeing this?" Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested she was barely holding it together. "My son was ambushed by reporters asking if I'm using you for money." Lucas heard the ice in his own voice, the distance already forming. "This needs to stop. I know. I'm handling it. I've got legal working on." "You can't legal this away, Victoria. They're hunting my kid. Do you understand that Mason is 7 years old and he's scared to go to school because of us?" "Lucas, I'm sorry. I didn't think that's the problem." "You didn't think." He paced his small living room, rage and fear making him cruel. "You didn't think about what it means when a billionaire dates some nobody bartender. You didn't think about how this would affect him." "So what are you saying?" Her voice went quiet, dangerous. "I'm saying we need space. Time for this to die down. I can't have my son traumatized because his father is your what? Your novelty, your walk on the wild side. Is that what you think this is to me?" She sounded hurt now, the control cracking. I don't know what to think. I just know I have to protect my son, and right now that means protecting him from this circus. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Lucas thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but cold. You're scared, so you're running. You're pushing me away because it's easier than fighting for us. I'm protecting my family. By destroying what we have, by proving yourself right that I'd leave when things got hard, she took a shaky breath. I'm not leaving Lucas. You are. He wanted to argue, wanted to explain that this wasn't running, this was survival. But the words tangled in his throat, and in the silence, she hung up. Mason was watching him with wide eyes. Are you and Victoria breaking up, Mom? Maybe. I don't know, buddy. Lucas pulled his son onto the couch, trying to find words that wouldn't add to the fear already there. Sometimes grown-ups need space when things get complicated. That's what you said before Mom left. Mason's voice was very small. You said you needed space, and then she never came back. The parallel hit like a knife between ribs. This is different. Hal Lucas didn't have an answer for that. He held his son and stared at his phone at the photo of him and Victoria frozen in a moment of happiness that now felt like evidence of a crime. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Yesterday they were declaring love. Today the world was declaring war. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana Chen, Victoria's CFO. He'd never given her his number, but powerful people had ways of getting what they needed. She's in an emergency board meeting. They're voting on her leadership. Preston Whitmore is leading the charge. You need to know what you cost her. The message was followed by a photo of Victoria standing in front of a conference table full of men in suits, her expression carved from ice, her posture radiating defiance even as she was being judged. Lucas stared at the photo for a long time. Then he texted back, "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her yourself," Diana replied, "if you're man enough." But he wasn't. He wasn't man enough to weather this storm, wasn't brave enough to stand beside her while cameras flashed and strangers dissected their lives. He was just a bartender who'd gotten in over his head, who'd let himself believe he could have something beautiful with someone extraordinary, who'd forgotten that reality always catches up. The week that followed was a special kind of hell. Reporters camped outside his apartment building for 3 days before finally losing interest. Lucas had to arrange for Mason to be picked up from school by Mrs. Chen through a back entrance to avoid photographers. The nursing home called twice to complain about media harassment, asking questions about Ellen Grant and her son's relationship with a billionaire. Lucas stopped going to his bartending shifts at the Anchor, not because he was fired, but because his presence turned the bar into a circus. Marcus covered for him, but Lucas knew he couldn't hide forever. Bills didn't stop coming just because your life imploded. Mason withdrew into himself, no longer chattering about dinosaurs flinching when the doorbell rang. Lucas found him crying in his room one night, clutching the stegosaurus figure Victoria had admired. I miss her, Dad. His son's voice was broken. Is she gone like Mom? The question shattered something in Lucas's chest. I don't know, buddy. Did we do something wrong? Why does everyone leave? You didn't do anything wrong. Nobody did. Lucas held his son, feeling the weight of every choice he'd made. Sometimes things are just hard and grown-ups don't know how to fix them. But Victoria wasn't like other grown-ups. She knew how to fix things. The simple faith in his son's voice was both beautiful and devastating. Mason was right. Victoria did know how to fix things, and Lucas had pushed her away before she could try. Victoria tried calling 14 times in those first 3 days. He let every call go to voicemail, unable to face her voice, unable to explain why he was doing exactly what she'd predicted, running scared. On day 4, Marcus showed up at his apartment with groceries and disappointment. You look like hell. Marcus unpacked milk and bread with deliberate movements. Appreciate the observation. You gonna tell me why you were hiding? I'm not hiding. I'm protecting Mason. From what? From a woman who loves you, from cameras that have already moved on. Marcus turned to face him, and the disappointment in his expression was worse than anger. Or are you protecting yourself from having something good because you're terrified it won't last? You don't understand. Lucas's voice came out defensive. You didn't see Mason's face when reporters asked if his dad was a gold digger. You didn't hear him ask if Victoria was leaving like his mother did. No, but I know what I see. I see a man who's spent so long expecting abandonment that he abandons first. Marcus sat down heavily. I see a man proving himself right that good things don't happen to people like us. That's not, isn't it? When your wife left, you decided it was because you weren't enough. Not rich enough, not stable enough, not worth staying for. And now you've got a woman who's choosing you despite everything, and you're so convinced she'll leave that you're driving her away to prove yourself right. The words hit too close to truth Lucas didn't want to examine. I'm doing what's best for my son. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're teaching him that love isn't worth fighting for. That when things get hard, you run. That's the lesson he's learning, Lucas. Not from Victoria, from you. Marcus left the groceries and departed, closing the door with a quiet click that felt louder than a slam. Lucas stood in his kitchen, surrounded by food he hadn't asked for, and let himself really look at what he'd done. He'd pushed Victoria away at the first real obstacle, had proven her fear correct that he'd bail when scared, instead of fighting through it. He'd taught his son that retreat was safer than risk. He'd become his father. The realization sat heavy in his chest. His father who'd left when things got hard, who'd chosen easy over difficult, who'd walked away rather than fight for the family he'd promised to protect. Lucas had spent his entire adult life trying to be different from that man, and in 1 week of fear and pride, he'd become exactly the same. His phone buzzed, not Victoria this time, but an email from the nursing facility, clinical language that translated to financial catastrophe. Ellen's care was being increased from standard to intensive. The new cost, $11,500 monthly, insurance covered 60%. Lucas was responsible for the remaining $4,600. He stared at the numbers, doing math that didn't work no matter how he rearranged it. He was already maxed out on credit cards, already working 3 jobs, already drowning in $94,000 of combined medical and student loan debt. There was no room for an additional $4,600 monthly. None. 3 options presented themselves, each more impossible than the last. Move his mother to a cheaper facility with lower quality care. Bring her home to an apartment where he worked 16-hour days and couldn't provide supervision, or borrow money he had no way to repay. For 2 weeks, Lucas tried to solve it himself. He picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop, working doubles until his hands shook from exhaustion. He dropped one of his law classes to free up time for more work hours. He slept 4 hours a night and functioned on coffee and desperation. Mason noticed, "Dad, you look like you did when Mom left. I'm scared." "I'm fine, buddy. Just busy with work and school." But Mason wasn't fooled, and neither was Marcus when Lucas showed up for a rare bar shift looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. "When's the last time you slept?" Marcus pulled him aside during a rare quiet moment. "I don't know. Tuesday?" "It's Friday." Marcus's expression was grim. "You're going to kill yourself. I don't have a choice. My mother needs care. Mason needs food and a roof. Those things require money I don't have. So call Victoria. She would help in a heartbeat." "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp. "I can't. That would make everything everyone said about me true." "What?" "That you're human, that you need help sometimes." Marcus shook his head. "Pride's going to kill you, son." And then what happens to Mason? The question haunted him through the rest of his shift, through the walk home at 3 a.m., through checking on his sleeping son and staring at bills he couldn't pay. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. But asking Victoria for money, especially now after he'd pushed her away, felt like confirmation of every ugly thing the newspapers had implied. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, Lucas was closing the bar alone when Marcus appeared from the back office, phone in hand. "I did something you're going to hate me for. What I called Victoria. Told her you're killing yourself. That you need help and you're too stubborn to ask. You had no right." Lucas's hands clenched into fists. "Someone has to save you from yourself." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "She's coming, and you're going to let her help you, or I swear to God I'll drive you to the hospital myself when you collapse from exhaustion." The bar door opened and Victoria walked in. She looked different, thinner. Tired, her usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. But her eyes were fierce, determined, locked on Lucas with an intensity that made his knees weak. "Hi." Her voice was careful, controlled. "Hi." He couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at her. Marcus made himself scarce, disappearing into the back with a muttered excuse about inventory. They stood alone in the empty bar, the same place they'd met, the same place everything started, the same place everything might end. Why did you come? Lucas finally managed. Because Marcus called and said you're dying. Because I love you and I'm not going to let pride kill you. She stepped closer. Because despite everything, despite you pushing me away and proving every fear I had about people leaving when things get hard, I still believe in us. Victoria, I can't the money, the medical bills, the fact that I need help. It makes everything they said true. It makes me the person everyone thinks I am. What human someone who sometimes needs support. She closed the distance between them. Lucas asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart enough to know when you can't do everything alone. But if I take money from you, it's not about the money. It's about partnership, about letting someone you love carry part of the weight. She reached for his hands and he let her take them, too tired to resist. I have resources you need. You have a family that needs care. Those are just facts. They don't make you a gold digger or a user or whatever ugly thing you're calling yourself. They make you someone who loves his mother enough to get her help even when accepting that help hurts his pride. I pushed you away. I said terrible things. I proved you right about everything. You were scared. I understand scared. Her voice softened. But Lucas, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep choosing isolation over partnership, pride over survival. At some point, you have to trust that I mean what I say when I tell you I'm staying. How can you still want this after everything? Because I know the difference between someone using me and someone who's terrified of needing me. Because I see you struggling and I have the power to help and I choose to do it. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because I love you. She squeezed his hands. Let me help, please. He wanted to say no, wanted to maintain his independence, wanted to prove he could handle everything himself. But he couldn't. He was drowning and she was offering a lifeline and pride wasn't worth dying for. If I let you help, we do it right, his voice came out rough. Formal loan agreement. Market interest rate. I pay you back over time, even if it takes decades. I need to know I'm not just taking from you. Deal. She said it without hesitation. We'll get lawyers, draw up contracts, make it official, whatever you need to feel okay about this. And no more surprise help. No paying for things without asking. We discuss financial decisions together like partners, not like patron and charity case. Agreed. She pulled him into a hug and he let himself lean into her. Let himself be held while relief and exhaustion and love tangled into something he couldn't name. We're going to figure this out. Together. I'm sorry. The words came out muffled against her shoulder. For pushing you away, for being too scared to fight for us, for teaching Mason that running is easier than staying. You're here now, that's what matters. She pulled back to look at him. But Lucas, if you get scared again, you talk to me. You don't disappear for 3 weeks. You don't make decisions about our relationship without me. Okay, he meant it this time. Really meant it. They spent the next hour going over the reality of his financial situation, the numbers laid bare without shame or judgment. Victoria listened without trying to fix everything immediately, without throwing money at problems like they were inconveniences to be eliminated. She asked while questions, took notes, treated it like the business negotiation it needed to be for Lucas to accept it. We'll set up a loan for $100,000, enough to cover your mother's increased care for 2 years and pay off your highest interest debt. She was already pulling up calculator apps on her phone. 3.5% interest market rate for personal loans. You'll pay $800 monthly over 15 years. That's extremely generous. He knew enough about finance to recognize she was giving him favorable terms. It's fair, and more importantly, it's sustainable. You can afford $800 a month without destroying yourself. She met his eyes. This isn't charity, Lucas. This is me investing in us, in your ability to finish law school, to have bandwidth for our relationship to be present with Mason. That's worth more to me than any investment portfolio. But what if I can't pay you back? What if something happens and I default, then we deal with it together? That's what partners do. She reached across the bar, taking his hand. But Lucas, I need you to hear me. This loan isn't about the money. I could write this check and never notice it missing. For me, this is about respecting your need to contribute, to maintain your dignity, to feel like an equal partner. That's why we're doing it this way, not because I need the money back, but because you need to know you're paying it back. The words hit him differently than before. She wasn't doing this despite his pride. She was doing it because of his pride. She understood that the loan agreement wasn't about her, it was about him, about giving him a way to accept help without losing himself. Thank you, his voice came out rough, for understanding, for fighting for us even when I was fighting against you. They agreed to have independent lawyers review everything to make it official and binding and real. Lucas needed that paper trail, needed the proof that he was paying back every cent, needed the dignity of legitimate debt rather than handed-down largesse. When everything was settled, when terms were agreed and lawyers' names exchanged, Victoria stood to leave. It was past 4 a.m. and they both had obligations in a few hours. What about your board? Lucas asked suddenly. Diana said Preston was leading a vote against you. Victoria's expression darkened. Preston's been trying to undermine me since we broke up 2 years ago. The scandal gave him ammunition. She straightened her shoulders. I survived the vote, barely, 7-5 in my favor. But I made it clear anyone who has a problem with my personal life can take it up with me directly or leave. You could have lost everything because of me. I could have lost everything by choosing work over love. Again, she cupped his face. I made that mistake with Preston. I'm not making it again. Yes, the board gave me hell. Yes, the scandal hurt. But you know what would have hurt more? Letting you go because I was scared of what people would think. What about Preston? Is he still on the board for now? But I've made it clear one more stunt like this and he's out. She smiled grimly. Turns out when you own 40% of the company, you have options. Thank you. Lucas walked her to the door. For not giving up on me. For fighting for us even when I was fighting against you. I told you I'm not leaving. She kissed him softly. I meant it then. I mean it now. We're going to have a lot more fights, Lucas. About money, about control, about your need to do everything yourself and my need to fix everything. But we're going to have them together as partners. Deal, deal. He pulled her close one more time, breathing in the scent of her perfume and feeling the steady beat of her heart. I love you too. Now go home. Get some sleep. We'll deal with everything else tomorrow. He watched her car disappear into the pre-dawn darkness, and for the first time in weeks, Lucas felt like he could breathe. The problems weren't solved. There would be lawyers and contracts and years of payments ahead. There would be more fights about pride and partnership, more moments when his instinct would be to retreat rather than lean in. But she was staying. She'd fought for him when he was too scared to fight for himself. She'd seen him at his worst, broke exhausted, cruel with fear, and she'd chosen him anyway. The 5-minute bet was well and truly lost. They'd found something bigger than curiosity, deeper than attraction, more resilient than either of them expected. They'd found partnership, the messy, complicated, sometimes painful kind that required trust and vulnerability and the courage to accept help. They'd found each other. And this time Lucas wasn't running.